appreciate you being here. This is our 2024-2020, the beginning of our 2024-2025 Club Speaker Series. And as our first event, we have the really big honor. We tend not to do this, and we had the amazing opportunity of doing this. So I thank all the authors of this edited volume to give us the honor to actually make this event a book presentation. So that's what we're doing today. My name is David Ortiz. I am the faculty fellow for the Center for Latin American and Border Studies CLABS. And I want to welcome you all to this event. Like I said, this event is a book presentation and is the book presentation of Frontera, Madrehood, Brown Mothers Challenging Transborder Violence and Oppression at the U.S. Mexico Border, that is published by the University of Arizona Press. The event is co-sponsored by us, by CLABS, the Theater Arts Department, and the College of Arts and Sciences Fulton Endowed Chair. There will be a big panel discussion. We have some people present here and other ones online that might at least are present, that are part of the book, that were important part of the book. And there will be a reception to follow this event at the Isabel M. Crouch Readers Theater, which is actually next door, correct? Right there. So you're all invited to that reception. I don't want to take a lot of your time because I want to give most of the time to the panelists, but I will do a few short bios of some of the panelists, and then I will give the microphone to Dr. Bermudez Tapia, who's going to introduce the rest of the panelists. We do have simultaneous translation, I think, so if you do need to hear this in Spanish, please ask for a headset. They're available in the back. Okay, so let me begin by introducing some of our panelists today. Maria Cristina Morales is a professor of sociology at the University of Texas, El Paso. Her research focuses on social inequality among Latinx, the U.S. Mexico border, and structural violence. Dr. Cynthia Bejarano is a Regents Professor in Gender and Sexuality Studies and English at NMSU. Her scholarship and advocacy center on the U.S. Mexico border and the embodiment of violence in vulnerable communities. Dr. Berta Bermudez Tapia is an assistant professor of sociology at New Mexico State University. Her research focuses on the impacts of state power on migrant and border lives and the production of violence on the Mexico-U.S. border. The next set of panelists will be introduced by my colleague, Dr. Bermudez Tapia.
Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. So we also have the great honor to have here Paola Flores Bonilla from Durango, Mexico, and Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. It's a community activist who initiated Voces Sin Eco after her daughter Maria Sagrario was a feminicide victim in 1998. We also have the honor to have Paola Isabel Nava Gonzalez. She's granddaughter of Paola Flores Bonilla, and she's an artist who cultivated her love for art by drawing portraits, mainly of her grandmother and others, who she draws inspiration from in El Paso del Norte region. We also have Taide Elena. She is the founding member of the Border Patrol Victims Network, a solidarity network formed after her teenage grandson, Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, was killed in Nogales, Arizona in 2012. And lastly, we have Marisa Torres. She's a doctoral student in public health at San Diego State University and the University of California at San Diego. Her work centers on Latinx health disparities in the San Diego Imperial County area.
Thank you, Dr. Bermudez Tapia. Without further ado, I will pass the microphone to Dr. Cynthia Bejarano. In the chat, we are actually adding all of our social media for the Center of Latin American and Border Studies. Please follow us if you want to know of further events that we will plan for this semester and next. Dr. Bejarano.
Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. Seems good. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Before we get started, I do want to just reiterate if this will be an English-Spanish presentation. So if you need a headset, please, Mauricio, wave back there. You can get a headset from Mauricio. And we have our wonderful interpreter, Annabelle Vela, back. She's sequestered, but she's going to be doing the opposite language of the presenter. The same goes for people that are online. If you need any interpretation from English to Spanish or Spanish to English, then just hit the global symbol on your Zoom, and then you can select the language English or the language Spanish, okay? All right, wonderful. Thank you all so very much for being here, making time to be here. We said 5 o'clock, so we could start at 5:30 because we're always on people of color time. I appreciate everybody here. Thank you, Drs. David Ortiz and Dr. Bermudez Tapia for co-sponsoring this event through the Center for Latin American and Border Studies. And also Professor Will Kilroy. I see Professor Lurie, who's representing the theater department here right now. And funding from the College Assistance, the ROM program, the College of Arts and Sciences Stan Fulton Endowment. These sorts of activities don't take place with just one person working on this alone. This has been months and months of preparation, years of working on this project together. And there are several people I want to thank very quickly on behalf of my co-editor, Dr. Cristina Morales, and I. I'm trying not to use my glasses, but anyway. So I'd like to begin by thanking the College of Arts and Sciences, Dean Enrico Pontelli, and especially the work of Lucille Casas and Kelly Cooper, people who do the hard labor when people are not seen are the reason why this book has come to fruition. I want to especially thank my NMSU camp family. Many of you are here, the students that are here, my beloved colleagues and staff. I want to do a special shout out to Cynthia Bartow, who makes everything work like magic. She is behind this book as well of reconciling P cards and purchases and all sorts of things. So thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you to Saida Martin. Today is her birthday. Happy birthday, Saida. She's online at ASU working on her PhD. And Fatima Oliveros for their support in preparing the manuscript. Fatima, raise your hand really quickly. Okay. Fatima Oliveros also designed the beautiful poster that you may have seen all over the place, showing the amazing artwork of Paula Isabel Nava Gonzalez. Raise your hand, Isabel. Thanks again to Fatima, to Natalie Tarwater, Diana Lopez, and Martha Chavez for hanging up posters across campus and volunteering for the event. Thanks to Arik Guevara from Alma's Kitchen for the amazing food that we will eat later today. Thanks to Colin King, Alejandro Guillen, and Daniel Ortega for their assistance with the book sales that will take place at the reception. Big thanks also to David Chavez, Marqueta Davalos, and Frank Sage for their IT support seated back there. And always the incredible Annabelle Vela for her interpretation work that you saw earlier. She's sequestered back there. Thank you all for making time. For colleagues that came as far away from Ciudad Juarez, from COLEF, from UACJ, that are online, for Representative Ray Lara for being here, for colleagues like Dr. Silvia Acosta and Dr. Linda Schultz, representatives from the university. Again, my department head, Dr. Liz Shermer, and then of course my camp colleagues. Thank you all for being here. My beloved family, our family, my son Joaquin, I love you, I adore you. My husband, Jeff Shepard, Dr. Shepard, I love you, I adore you. Even when you don't throw the trash when I ask, sorry. Anyhow, sorry. Okay, so lastly, we want to thank our colleagues that are present online and then also here who form part of this collection. I did see Dr. Margaret Brown Vega. Can you please raise your hand? Margaret, I saw, there she is. So she also is part of this collection, so I wanted to recognize her. She's hiding in the corner over there. And then online, our colleagues, Doctora Judith Flores Carmona, Leticia Lopez from Ciudad Juarez, Doctora Maria Eugenia Hernandez Sanchez from UACJ, Ciudad Juarez, and Doctora Sandra Gutierrez. They all are contributors to this very important book. Dr. Marisol Rodriguez Sosa is on her way from UACJ as well. I think we can finally start very quickly going over the impetus for this book, this labor of love of ours. And it started very simply as an idea that both Dr. Morales and I had. Um, we we went to a parade, the Thanksgiving parade in El Paso, and we started to go to the parade over the course of many years when our children were much smaller. And we started to realize the changes that were taking place, the further policing, the militarization, the securitization that we saw happening, the involvement of very young people who we never saw that growing up when we ourselves used to go. And so that sort of sparked this question of ours of what's happening here, what has changed from the time of, we won't tell you how long it's been, but when we were children ourselves. And so we used to see what the quintessential parade route with high school bands, marching bands. In El Paso, there's Scottish Pied Pipers. I forget what high school they're from Baylor High School. And you know, Matachinas from Ciudad Juarez. Just a whole slew of wonderful, wonderful images, activities, people that represented this area, the Paso del Norte region, and all of that seemed to have changed. So things started working initially that way from a Thanksgiving holiday, an outing for several years, to we need to write something about this, to realizing that we are two women and they're amazing, incredible women who are mothers or women who mother or other people who mother, that it was important to capture those stories. We intentionally selected these women over the course of many years. Today's presenters, if it isn't obvious, we tried to pull together, there's 30 contributors who contributed to our collection. And if you can see the little dots here, they should represent, the pings should represent every place where our contributors are coming from. So we have representation from the entire U.S. Mexico border, from both sides of the U.S. Mexico border. We had our Spanish colleagues, friends, family members, chosen family. We had their work translated into English with the desire to eventually be able to translate the book into Spanish in its entirety. We have today people from representing Reynosa and Matamoros, Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, Las Cruces, ambos Nogales, and San Diego online as well, and you'll hear from them in a minute. In Frontera Motherhood, and this next slide represents all of our contributors. Amazing, incredible researchers, scholars, activists, activist mothers who shared their testimonios and their hard work with us. Thank you very much for that. In Frontera Motherhood, we provide powerful accounts from community activists, feminists, and activist scholars who strongly advocate for their families and communities along both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border amid structural, systemic, political, sexualized, sexist, homophobic, social, and racialized violence. Our contributors challenge traditional tropes of who can mother and how one can mother, describing the realities of trans mothering and the movement back and forth across militarized and policed international boundaries for many mothers, which is at the core of Frontera Motherhood. This book offers a unique opportunity to share the experiences of mothers who mother in numerous life circumstances and who work to undo the social forces that attempt to limit and control our movement, our ideologies, and even our intimate relationships, including how we raise and support children and young people. So I'll stop there and then pass the baton, the parade baton, over to Dr. Morales. Thank you.
I also want to say deeply grateful for Cynthia, her collaboration throughout the years that we had, and what several years of conversations that petition into this Frontera Madrehood book that is very important to me, and I'm very excited to be able to give these wonderful mothers a space to voice their daily life experiences, how they navigate these structural inequalities and still come out resilient and raise children that are resilient and happy and also navigating this world. So I am very thankful for your friendship and your collaboration. And I'm very thankful for NMSU and for David and Brenda, Berta's collaboration to put this together, and everybody on your list. And I also want to give a shout out and some love to my colleagues and students. He's putting his head down right now, but Dr. Wiley, who is my colleague from UTEP, and to my students, Cecily and Yamaris, thank you for being here. And so I wanted to also talk about a little bit about the framework that we had in mind. So the Frontera Madrehood is not just the title of a book. It's also the framework, the theoretical framework that we use to, that linked both the scholar activists and the organic intellectuals work together. And it's not just a theoretical framework, it was also a methodology at the same time. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what that means. So just to break down the concepts, of course, Frontera is being in the borderlands and being in our border, in particular, del Paso del Norte, but also recognizing the commonalities of lived experiences of mothers across the entire U.S. Mexico border on both sides, right? And so a lot of the, especially organic intellectuals, they're as strong and resilient as they are, sometimes they're not given the spaces that they deserve to tell their stories. And so that was something that was important to us. We didn't want to interview them and then be our respondents. We want them to have authorship and ownership of their own stories, right? Like they are, and they're, and nobody could tell their stories better than they can. So we wanted to give them space to be able to do that. So we have a mixture of both testimonials and scholar activists who contributed chapters throughout the collection. So the Frontera is the borderlands. The Madrehood is, as Cynthia mentioned, is not just your biological mothering, like we think of as mothering in a much more broader sense, is the mother work of caring for each other, of caring for communities, right? It's a non-essentializing way of looking at motherhood. So that was something that was important and that also connects the contributors. And then the aspect of the hood is the groundedness in our own neighborhoods, in our barrios, and also the recognition that space and geography really matters and really shapes the way in which we parent, right? And the which we care for communities and each other. And so those three concepts were very important to us, and they connect other contributors together.
So I think this is a good place to share space with our colleagues, many of which, all of them have served either as mentors or inspiration for this book. And I'd like to start, if it's okay, if we can start with the artist who designed, who made this beautiful, beautiful image of Paula Bonilla Flores. And so I'd like to ask, we call her Little Paula, Paula Isabel Nava Gonzalez, if she could take the microphone and then maybe come up to the kiosk to manage her Instagram account. Paola may, if I can, while David's, oh, he already has it set up. Okay. She was very gracious in offering her artwork to be the book cover. And it initially was it was going to be an insert, which it is in the book, to highlight her grandmother's testimonio. And the University of Arizona Press, and I failed to mention on Zoom, we have a University of Arizona Press representative, Elizabeth Honor Wilder. The press asked us, this is a beautiful piece of art. would it be possible, would the artist allow us to use it for the book cover? And we asked Paola and she said yes, and we have been so thrilled. And the press is so excited with her work, in fact, that they want to use her artwork as the opening page to promote and feature other work for University of Arizona Press.
Buenas tardes, ¿sí me escucho? Primero que nada, quiero agradecer a la doctora Cintia Bejarano por darme la oportunidad de compartir mi arte con todos ustedes y por permitirme hablar hoy. Mi nombre es Paola Isabel Nava González, tengo 22 años y yo soy la nieta más grande de Paula Flores Bonilla. Muchos de ustedes conocen o han escuchado de mi abuelita por su lucha constante contra los feminicidios en Ciudad Juárez, por su valentía para pelear por las que no pueden, sin importar lo difícil o tardado que sea. Desde que nací, crecí rodeada del activismo de mi familia, escuchándolos hablar sobre los feminicidios y lo poco que se hacía para evitarlos. Y como fui creciendo, fui tomando conciencia de la problemática que tenemos en nuestra frontera. Recuerdo que desde niña mis primos y yo acompañábamos a mi abuelita a las protestas, usando playeras con la foto de mi tía Sagrario, la cual fue asesinada antes de que yo naciera. Pero con lo que pasó del tiempo llegué a aprender tanto de ella que siento que la conozco. Mi abuelita es una de las personas más dulces, amables y consideradas que conozco. Es la abuelita típica que te da dinero sin que se den cuenta tus papás para que vayas y te compres papas y sodas. La que para convivir mejor con nosotros aprendió a usar Instagram, TikTok y los stickers de WhatsApp. Y en más de una ocasión se ha puesto a jugar beer pong con nosotros y ganó. La abuelita con la que yo crecí es una señora decidida e inquebrantable, segura de sí misma, dispuesta a enfrentarse a quien sea por su familia. Toda mi vida la he visto exigir justicia para el caso de mi tía, y he tenido la oportunidad de ver los resultados de todos sus esfuerzos. No cabe duda que mi abuelita es mi héroe y mi inspiración no solo en mi vida, sino también en mi arte. Mi abuelita siempre está ahí cuando necesito una modelo para una foto, un dibujo o cualquier otra forma de expresar mi creatividad. Ella me inspira porque es una persona que, sin importar todas las cosas que ha pasado, ha mantenido su fe, su esencia y su persistencia para seguir adelante. Me siento muy afortunada de poder compartir este dibujo con todos ustedes, ya que es uno de mis favoritos. Y también quería tomar esta oportunidad para agradecer al maestro Ramiro Ordóñez y al maestro César Aguayo por haberme impulsado a aprender más sobre el arte. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you very much, Paola, little Paola. It's this is just such an honor to have this assembly of people, of women, and the contributors that are here and online, and we're just so grateful for their words and testimonio. We can, if it's okay, we'll start with Paula Bonilla Flores, who has inspired many people across the world with her activism, with her story. She's been very special in our lives since for many years, and too many to count, 1998, I guess. And I want to give her the floor.
Bueno, sí, sí me escucho. Voy a parar un poquito. Ay. Mi nombre es Paula Flores Bonilla. Primeramente quiero agradecer mucho a la doctora Cintia Bejarano, la doctora Cristina, por la elaboración del libro, a todos los contribuyentes. Agradezco a los presentes por este espacio que nos dieron. Agradezco estas oportunidades de, de seguir escuchando, de que sigan escuchando mi voz, que es la de mi hija Sagrario. Bueno, nosotros somos migrantes, migramos en el año del 95, en noviembre del 95, del estado de Durango a Juárez. Mi familia era conformada por siete hijos, 6 mujeres y un varón, y mi esposo Jesús González, que ya no vive. Llegamos a la comunidad de Lomas de Poleo. Fue muy drástico el cambio de Durango a Juárez. ya que nosotros venimos de una región donde hay mucho bosque, hay mucha vegetación, mucha agua. Llegamos a Lomas de Poleo, donde no existía ninguna de esas cosas, ni electrificación, ni agua. Y para mí, cuando empezamos a vivir ahí, se me hacía que era lo más drástico, llegar a un lugar donde no hay agua, pero lo más drástico yo creo empezó cuando soy mamá de una niña asesinada, como les dijo la doctora Cintia, de María Sagrario. A los 2 años y medio de estar en Juárez desapareció mi hija Sagrario. Desde ahí, a raíz de la muerte de mi hija, es cuando empieza mi activismo, mi trabajo de comunidad. Yo creo que de una cosa tan terrible salieron cosas muy buenas, porque me empecé a involucrar con el apoyo de mi comunidad y más que nada de mi familia, a gestionar los servicios en esa comunidad, empezando desde la luz eléctrica como el agua, y pues hasta que entrara un camión recolector de basura, todo lo que se necesitaba ahí. Lo pude hacer representando un comité de vecinos. Me sentí contenta también de trabajar con las mujeres de Lomas de Poleo, impartiendo algunos talleres o consiguiendo personas quienes lo pudieran impartir. Ese es mi trabajo de comunidad. Quiero mencionar que cuando yo estaba en Durango, únicamente mi dedicación era a mis hijas, a mi familia. Yo desconocía todo esto hasta estar parada como estoy ahorita aquí ante tanta gente con un micrófono. Bueno, mi trabajo era mi dedicación a mis hijas. Mi esposo siempre fue motosierrista, él trabajaba en el monte, en el campo. Él se iba toda la semana y únicamente regresaba los fines de semana. Estaba con nosotros y se volvía a regresar. Entonces prácticamente mis hijas crecieron pues más conmigo, ¿verdad? Que con mi esposo. Pero él de alguna manera, él siempre les demostró el amor, el apoyo, ya que él era el sostén de la familia. Entonces, para nada, yo me imaginaba poderme convertir en una activista, una activista de un reclamo de justicia por todo lo que está pasando a nivel mundial. Agradezco mucho todos estos espacios que nos han dado la doctora, que la conocemos, la doctora Cintia, que la conocemos desde el 99, a raíz de la muerte de Sagrario. Y bueno, yo creo que a pesar de todo lo que nos ha pasado en Juárez, yo tengo una bendición muy grande, que son mis hijas, que hay mucha unión con mis nietos. Me siento orgullosa de mi nieta Paola. Oírla ahorita, que soy su inspiración. Yo tengo tres dibujos de ella que ella me los ha entregado cuando ya se los entregaban en la escuela. Los tengo en la sala. Me enorgullece mucho tenerlos ahí. Hizo uno muy bonito de las 3 generaciones, donde estoy yo, está Guille y ella. También me siento orgullosa de mi hija Guillermina, que a pesar de su corta edad, cuando pasó lo de Sagrario, ella pudo representar un grupo que se llamaba Voces sin Eco, conformado únicamente por 6 familias de niñas asesinadas. Ella pudo enfrentar eso y es la creadora también de la cruz. Podemos decir que esa cruz que anda a nivel mundial, ella es la creadora, surgió ahí en Voces sin Eco y nos da tristeza. A mí en lo personal me da tristeza que sigan pasando estos casos, pero yo creo que esa cruz habla por todas y me da gusto de también, a pesar de que han pasado tantas cosas, de que sea un símbolo tan sagrado y que con ese sea un símbolo de justicia, porque es un reclamo hacia las autoridades por todo lo que pasa. Entonces quiero decirles que me siento muy contenta de haber podido trabajar en mi comunidad, ya que cuando pasó lo de Sagrario y únicamente mi enfoque era pensar todo lo que le pasó a mi hija, pero cuando yo me involucro gestionando todos los servicios de esa comunidad, trabajando ahí, hasta llegar a lograr un jardín de niños que lleva el nombre de María Sagrario en esa comunidad. Está también el busto está un busto que acaban de develar de María Sagrario en ese jardín del 29 de abril, que es fecha muy simbólica cuando se encontró el cuerpo de ella. Mi hija duró 14 días desaparecida y a los 14 días se encontró. Entonces yo creo que mi hija vive, que mi hija está en ese kinder, que mi hija está donde a ella le gustaba estar. Y pues ya se nos acabó el tiempo, pero quiero decirles que yo creo que tenemos mucho rato todavía para seguir pidiendo justicia y agradezco a mi hija aquí presente, a mis hijas, a mi nieta, y pues que Dios me los bendiga y gracias. Siempre he dicho que estos libros, cualquier entrevista para mí es un acto de reclamo de justicia. Gracias.
Vino también, están doña Paula y Paola chica, están acompañadas de dos hijas de doña Paula, la mamá de Paola, Guillermina González, y la hermana de Guillermina y tía de Paola y hija de Paola, Juana. Muchísimas gracias, como siempre, que es nuestra inspiración del mundo. Podemos escribir libros en nombre de Paola, eh, dar clases en su nombre, dar un diplomado, bachillerato, licenciatura en nombre de ella, porque se los juro que esta mujer ha apoyado a personas mundialmente y no lo digo y no miento así nomás porque la quiero mucho, pero es la realidad. Entonces, de tenerla aquí con nosotros en nuestra presencia es muy importante para mí, para que ustedes la puedan conocer y saber de su historia, y muchísimo más. Muchas gracias, Paula. Ahora vamos a continuar. I'm sorry. We're going to continue with Dr. Berta Bermudez Tapia, a dear colleague and sociologist here at New Mexico State University.
Oof, this is hard. I don't know how I'm going to do this after listening to like this testimony. It's kind of like, oh, it's hard. But and actually, what I'm going to talk to you about today is tough too, because when I was putting together this presentation about the work of one of the a very powerful NGO in Matamoros and Reynosa. These are Mexican cities located on the Tamaulipas and Texas border, kind of the eastest part of Texas and Tamaulipas. I received a call from the director of the NGO that I wrote the testimony about, and she asked me not to disclose her full name and not to like highlight her NGO, basically because of this. And as most of the NGOs who are working with migrants today at the Texas Tamaulipas border are under fire because of the Texas government's clampdowns on humanitarian aid workers. So basically what they are doing is they are accusing these NGOs on trafficking migrants. And recently there's been an attack of Catholic Charities that is like a very important NGO in the Rio Grande Valley, who have like at least 2 shelters that serve on the U.S. side migrants who just arrive into the United States and does not have the means to go directly to the families that are going to support them in the United States. And well, there is a lot going on here, and a lot of these NGOs on the Rio Grande Valley are very, very afraid and upset about this situation, so they don't want to be on the spotlight. However, I still want to mention a little bit of the work they are doing there because it's extremely important for everybody to know what's going on there. So for that, I want to start talking a little bit of what happened when I start doing my research in Matamoros, particularly on the Matamoros camp. So this is, we had to go back to 2019, where the Mexican migration protocol started. And it's basically this remain in Mexico policy that everybody who asks for asylum needs to remain in Mexico for the duration of their hearings. So when this happened in Matamoros, people were just like near to the port of entry, like living there on the streets, on the sidewalks, and there was no protections from the Mexican government, or well, they were in Mexico, so there were not going to be protections from the U.S. government either. But there were a bunch, like we are talking about the port of entry, so you are probably all familiar with the different ports of entry in Juarez and El Paso. So they look the same. And imagine that they were just camping at that point, actually just sleeping on the sidewalks of that area that people constantly come in and out. So a lot of folks start seeing the situation, and there were just at that point individuals who wanted to make a difference. So they start pulling up supplies to support these migrants who were on the streets. First were just like tents, but then they start to talk to each other. And like, I know some things about, I don't know, medicine. So, okay, let's pull some resources so we can help people who have stomach aches or fevers or stuff like that. And then there was this NGO that, again, I'm not going to name by name, but I want to say what they do. And they start looking at the children. There were so many children living on the streets, and that they didn't have anything to do, or there was not activities for them to develop. So they start gathering teachers from these same migrants who were living there, because they realized there were a lot of K-12 and pre-K teachers living there, or people who just wanted to share what they know. And they start putting together like schools on the sidewalk of the port of entry. And later on, this is one of the most recent photos, they now have a place where children of migrants can go near to the shelters, and they can learn something there while they are waiting for their CBP1 appointments. And this is not the only NGO who has grown. These medical doctors now have like NGOs, structures where they can support people better. However, I think because, or I believe because they have grown in this way, is because the Texas government is now going after them. So I just want to end by saying that when I was asked by Christina and Cynthia about like this, and they said, we want to include Felicia on this book, I was like, there's no better person than Felicia, because Felicia is an agent of change and resistance. And she is one of the most strong leadership people that we have there. But she is also a Black Latina. And that's something that we don't see that much in the NGOs who are working with migrants on the border. And I think that's very powerful. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to talk and to write about Felicia's work. And I'm so sad and very upset that I cannot really like talk about everything that they're doing and name her with her last name and the work that her NGO is doing. But I'm pretty sure that she's going to continue working on this, and I'm going to continue working with them as well, because unfortunately this is something that continues, and we need to keep working to support the asylum seekers who are not only searching for a better life, they are searching for a way to save their lives, because that is what happened with asylum seekers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bermudez Tapia, for all your work, all your efforts. We have two more speakers that are going to join us online. And we need to just set up the technology here a little bit. It might be a little bumpy, but I'll go ahead and just take advantage of sharing a little bit that maybe, or do you want to mention the 3 sections of the book right quick while we get situated? Because migration plays a critical component. And while Cristina is checking things out here, we might have Doña Taide Elena log on here very shortly. And so we're kind of filling time for a second. Let's see if she's going to call. She should be calling here any minute. In the meantime, let me just real quickly recognize one of our other contributors that came from Juarez, from UACJ, Doctora Marisol Rodriguez Sosa. And I also want to mention, because our legislators are so busy, and I mentioned Representative Ray Lara, but I also want to recognize Representative Angelica Rubio, who's also here with us today. Thank you for listening to these stories. And so while we're waiting for Doña Taide Elena from the Border Patrol Victims Network, she will be logging on WhatsApp. So this is yet another example of how important it was for us to bring their stories to fruition, that some of our contributors are not here because they do not have a visa to be able to cross. They do not have a passport at this moment. They don't have the technology to be able to connect, which might be the case here shortly with Doña Taide, that's making every effort and has spent a lot of time testing. Here she is. That was perfect. So we'll go ahead and start, and then we'll come back to the sections of the book. Doña Taide, ¿sí me escucha? Taide Elena is calling in from Nogales, Arizona. She is the founder of the Border Patrol Victims Network. I came to know Doña Taide for a few years now, joining her organization on monthly Zoom meetings and in person to remember, to commemorate, memorialize her grandson, Jose Antonio Rodriguez, who was killed by a Border Patrol agent in southern Arizona, shooting into Nogales, Sonora, in the downtown district of Nogales, Sonora. He was shot repeatedly, shot and killed. And because of that, Doña Taide and many, many people who support her started the Border Patrol Victims Network.
Ajá. ¿Qué es lo que quieren saber?
Si nos puede contar un poco de su historia, de quién es usted, de quién era José Antonio Rodríguez y qué sucedió en unos minutitos.
Ok. ¿Ya puedo empezar?
Sí, ya.
Ok. Mi nombre es Taide Elena y soy la abuelita de José Antonio Elena Rodríguez, que mató un border patrol en la línea de la frontera de Nogales, Sonora, metiendo la mano por el cerco, donde disparó 30 balazos. 10 pegaron en el cuerpo de mi nieto, 8 en la espalda y 2 en la cabeza. Y quedó muerto en una banqueta a 2 cuadras de la casa, de su casa de él. José Antonio era un niño de 16 años que tenía metas, que tenía ilusiones. Era un buen niño, no porque fuera mi nieto, sino porque era buen niño. Estaba estudiando él su secundaria abierta, y su rutina de todos los días era levantarse, irse a la secundaria, venir y en la tarde irse a jugar fútbol. y luego ya en la noche iba al donde trabajaba su hermano a ayudarle a cerrar el Oxxo. Pero pues ese día su hermano llegó y su hermano no estaba y se vino, ya habían cerrado el Oxxo y se vino él solo por el mismo lugar en que caminaban siempre los dos. Y siempre era su misma rutina. Caminaban ese pedazo, compraban un hot dog en la esquina y ya se subían a la casa, porque hay una subida. José Antonio tenía muchas ilusiones de subirse a un avión. Entonces, yo ya les había dicho que íbamos a ir a Guadalajara los tres. Y cuando le dije, pues estaba emocionadísimo. Él quería saber qué se podía hacer arriba del avión y bueno, estaba ilusionado. Y sus metas, pues también eran buenas sus metas. Pero pues este señor, no sé, tenía necesidad de matar en ese momento quizás, porque pues su defensa fue que estaba tirando piedras. Pero pues ahí no había piedras en esa calle, ni hay. Entonces, luego, pues, cambiaron su versión, ¿no? Hubo muchas cosas raras en las cortes, muchas cosas que no son legales, pero pues bueno, total, justicia, que era lo que pedíamos y seguimos pidiendo, nunca llegó, nunca se dio. Y pues hubo testigos no presentes, que eso pues no es legal. Y pues muchas cosas más. Pero pues yo podría durar un día entero platicando de todo lo que nos hicieron en las cortes. Por eso yo ahora a los que están peleando en las cortes, les diría, no peleen la corte porque no les van a dar justicia. Peleen el civil, la corte civil, para que de perdida les den una reparación de daño, aunque los muertos no sean un mueble que se cambia por otro. La vida de José Antonio no tenía precio, no tiene precio. Y hemos luchado por 12 años buscando justicia. Hemos ido a muchas partes, hemos ido a México, hemos ido a Washington, a San Francisco y no, en 12 años no hemos conseguido nada. Absolutamente nada. Entonces, pues, yo los dejo a ustedes con sus pensamientos, ¿qué pensarán? Yo digo que este señor, al meter la mano por el cerco, violó los derechos humanos del niño y violó la soberanía mexicana. Y la ha estado violando Estados Unidos cada rato, cada vez que matan a alguien por el cerco. Pero México, pues calladito, no hace nada por ese lado. Entonces, promesas y promesas, y en eso ha quedado todo, en promesas. Entonces, pues, ese era mi José Antonio, ese era mi Toñito. un niño bueno, que no merecía morir así. Nadie merece morir así. Nadie. Menos un niño de 16 años que tiene toda una vida por delante. Señores, esta es mi versión sobre José Antonio y sobre sus juicios y sobre su justicia. Muchas gracias por escucharme y pues muchas gracias por estar ahí. Me hubiera encantado estar ahí presente, pero pues no pude. Pero pues ahí les dejo yo a ustedes para que reflexionen sobre esta muerte tan cruel y tan despiadada y sin justicia. Gracias. Gracias les doy a todos. Y los invito, si algún día pueden venir, cada día 10 del mes, tenemos vigilia en la parte en que murió José Antonio. Gracias. Gracias.
Okay, that worked. Yes, thank you, everyone. So we're going to move on to our last panelist that is on Zoom, and the last, but certainly not the least. We're really grateful that she's logging on from San Diego, and we'd like to. We might not be ending necessarily because we want to see if the two of the contributors that are in the audience, if they would like to say a few words, because we have time after Marisa. But before then, I'm going to hand things over to Marisa Torres Ruiz from San Diego State University, and she will share her work with the work that she did with her co-authors depicting the San Diego Imperial Valley area. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I can't hear you, but I think I did see a head nod. Okay, great. So first, I just want to start off by thanking the editors for the invitation to speak. It's really an honor to be a contributor to this anthology and just to hear from some of the panelists. So I'm Marisa Torres. I'm a doctoral candidate in public health. I'm located at the Institute of Behavioral and Community Health at San Diego State, and I had the privilege of co-authoring Chapter 10, which is Border Walls and Barriers to Care, along with Victoria Theus, who's also online. You may hear from her because I'm having some issues with my throat, so she's, offered to step in just in case it happens. And our senior author was Dr. Elva Arredondo. And so our chapter really delves into the structural factors that are shaping health outcomes for Latinas in this region. So we discuss unique characteristics of Latinas from both Imperial and San Diego counties. And we try to highlight some mental health considerations for this population. So in our chapter, we propose a conceptual model that really asks the reader to consider structural and systemic factors. So things such as sociopolitical factors and an individual's physical living environment. And we also consider intermediate influences. So things such as individual characteristics and true access to care. So there's multiple components to this, right? But for example, when we say true access to care, what does that mean for a woman? Is there care in the region that is available? Is it affordable? And is it acceptable, culturally acceptable for them? So we believe these collective factors to be powerful predictors of health outcomes for Latinas that are living in this region of the U.S. Mexico border. And if you have a book in front of you, you can reference our model. I believe it's on page 287 of the book. And so further in that chapter, we go on to describe some of the challenges that Latinas face related to employment and economic stability in this region. And so for this area, during the pandemic, what we saw was really disproportionate job loss among Latinas. And we think that it's really crucial to recognize that in this area, about 64% of Latinas are working in low-wage jobs, and they can often be underpaid in comparison to their counterparts, although they are performing the same job, right? So that as really a lever for economic stability and inequality. The cost of living in this border region is also staggering. So, for example, if you think about the national average of the cost of living index being around 100, the San Diego cost of living index is estimated to be around 160, so much higher than the national average. And so what does that mean for quality of life, the ability to thrive and to raise families in this area? I also want to highlight some alarming mental health statistics that we get into in the chapter. So this rate of Latinas facing up to 40% greater risk of postpartum depression in comparison to other groups. We've also found that Latina women experience increased stress, primarily due to isolation and a lack of social support. So not being connected to community, not having individuals, whether that's a partner, a parent, a friend, or someone that they can look toward and get support from, that can really detrimentally impact their mental health. And also when we think about cultural expectations, right? So we know that a lot of these cultural factors can be beneficial for many Latinas, but we also have to recognize that they can work in the opposite direction, right? By really hindering their wellness, their autonomy, and their ability to practice self-care. So thinking about cultural expectations as we start to think about designing interventions and public health programs to support these women. Globally, during the pandemic, and that's really where the data from our chapter comes from. We were able to gather local data from San Diego and Imperial counties. But I just want to highlight that on a global scale, we saw rates of stress, anxiety, depressive symptoms, fear, other psychological disturbances. We saw those rise in the general population during the pandemic. And we know that those experiences were compounded for marginalized Latinas who had to grapple with those intersections of racism, sexism, and just survival. So we can't stress enough really the need to improve our health infrastructures for Latinas, but especially for those that are residing in these border regions. And we think it's really critical that we prioritize culturally competent care to support these women to improve their desperate health outcomes. Our chapter really closes with some thought-provoking questions for the reader. So what we've noticed is that just on an epidemiological level, there's been a recent decline and a delay in childbirth among women of color. Why is that? And secondly, what would it look like to expand our concept of motherhood to encompass not just caring for others, but caring for oneself? So what would it look like if we could practice acts of mothering and self-care for ourselves? I just want to say thank you again, and I'll put my contact information in the chat in case there's any questions. Thank you.
Now, it would be an honor if the two contributors that are in the audience, if they would just share a little bit about their chapters and who they are. I would be honored. Dr. Margaret Branvega.
Can we pass you the microphone?
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, I wanted I really want to thank Christina and Cynthia for letting me be a part of this space to explore some of the ideas that have been going around in my head. I'm a former academic. I left academia for lots of reasons that I won't go into. But part of it was I didn't feel like I had a personal or professional space there. It wasn't for me. So I've done some other stuff since I left. So this chapter, writing it, actually allowed me to think through lots of things, what it is to be a former academic, one foot in maybe or one toe in, and trying to do very different kinds of work, trying to look for meaningful work, being very bitter about all of it perhaps. And so it was an opportunity for me to process some of that. So I really appreciate that opportunity. What I tried to do and what I wrote was to explore a little bit of a different way maybe of thinking about families, right? That's informed by my understanding of families training as being trained as an anthropologist, which I no longer am, not formally, but also drawing from a lot of the practical work that I've done in trying to support people who are in very difficult situations coming to this country, a lot of them being detained, for example, in a very difficult situation. I'm also what you might call a carceral abolitionist. I don't believe in prisons. I don't believe in detention centers, locking people up, policing, any of that kind of stuff, right? I think it's very harmful. And I've seen that harm very directly with some of the people that I've tried to support. So that's what the chapter is about a little bit, right? How can we maybe think about the support that we give to people that's much more in line with thinking about a family, even if we're not related to them by blood, because we don't have to be. Families don't have to be related by blood. How can we behave in ways where we are with them as family members, not as people trying to save them, not as people trying to, and this is where I'm kind of having some new thoughts, want to start an NGO to like address the problem that's so big it's probably never going to be resolved, right? I do think it's important for us to think about what happens when we go from something organic to supporting people and how that grows over time to something that perhaps is funded by the very government that is behind the violence, right? That's being inflicted on people. How do we, how does that pull us away from treating each other like family, basically, is something that I'm kind of thinking about now. So yeah, that's just something that I would like for everyone to kind of consider. Maybe we can pull ourselves always back, no matter what kind of work we're doing, pull ourselves always back to this idea of working with people as if they are our family, as if they are us, and that's the way I think that we can feel more freedom, that they can feel more free, that we can work with people to gain their freedom when they're in detained spaces or otherwise, when they feel trapped for other reasons. I feel like maybe that kind of sums up a little bit of what was in the chapter. Yeah. And it's an ongoing thought process, which it should be. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to for writing this book chapter. Well, I'm an academic. I live in Juarez, and I work in Juarez, and I'm also a migrant mother of this baby, and and well, he's grown old right now, but I've been living in Mexico and in Ciudad Juarez for the last 17 years. And before that, I lived for 10 years in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Was my first migration. I'm Mexican now, but I'm Cuban from origins. So in 2001, I was the time when I traveled to Brazil, and in 2009 we traveled to Mexico. He was just 1 year old, and well, we arrived in Mexico with one bag, uh, one little boy. And well, my chapter is it's called Frontera Motherhood, Survival Tactics of Urban Life. And it is about three specific things I want to share. First, my self-protection as a woman. Some tactics I was taught by other women about how should I drive if I had to had a car and not walking, and those things, how to drive a car, how to walk, where not to walk. In the first 10 days when I arrived to Juarez, in the first 10 days, I learned that I must stop walking. In Rio de Janeiro, it was normal to walk, and it is in a Latin American city, but it is different from Juarez. And in Juarez, women are not allowed to walk in the streets. It's not that their husband, their partners don't allow them. The fact is that it is dangerous. And the second part of the chapter is about self-protection of the family. The family, how do you find a safe place to live? How it is to what it is to find is a safe hood for raising a boy. I'm an architect and urban planner, and we don't like gated communities. Urban planners, we don't like gated communities. But in Juarez, I had to cope with the idea that theory is beautiful, practice is another thing. And where you live in a context of violence and extreme violence, you have to prioritize security. And the third part of the chapter is about networks between women, the networks we build to protect ourselves and our families. Thank you.
We have, I know that that was impromptu, and sorry for putting you both on the spot, Margaret and Marisol, but that was beautiful, both of you. Thank you. We have 4 other contributors online. I don't know if it's possible to open their mic if they'd like to say something. Dr. Judith Flores Carmona, Leticia Lopez in Juarez, Doctora María Eugenia Hernández Sánchez, and Doctora Sandra Gutierrez. And then we can do the Q&A. We have a couple of comments on chat. Dr. Flores Carmona is thanking Doña Taide. I'm going to relay her message of her strong testimonio and what a strong voice she has. You might be able to, no, you can't read it. And then she's giving her condolences for the loss of her grandson. Patricia Ravelo from Mexico, a sociologist and academic, very well known, who's done extensive research on Ciudad Juarez and border violence, is congratulating all of the authors on the coordination of this important work, to the testimonialistas for sharing their histories, their experiences of injustice, and their strength as well, to discuss the violence in the borderlands for women, for migrants and children. And she wants to thank us for this event. So is it going to be? Okay, so we're opening up, or we're not. I'm not doing anything. David is opening up. David is opening up the sound, the mic for our online contributors that are joining us. If any of them want to say anything.
Buenas tardes, Judith Flores Carmona, ¿me escuchan?
Yes. Yes.
Felicidades por este gran evento, un libro que no he podido soltar, que tengo la mala costumbre de leerlo por las noches y no puedo parar de llorar. Es fuerte, poderoso y una gran contribución a academia, a la universidad. Thank you so much for your amazing co-editorship, your feminista co-editorship, and also for allowing me and my colleague Brenda Rubio to co-author a piece that conceives or redefines what it means to be a mother. Muchísimas gracias.
So we had three broad sections. The first one was survival in the face of violence. And the second one was asserting rights and calling out hegemony and oppression through a praxis of Frontera motherhood. And then the third section confronting caging, migration, and deportation. So those were the three overarching themes in the book. And then we had several contributors in each of those sections.
Get Dr. Hernandez Sanchez to log on. Thank you for your patience. So be thinking about questions that you might have or comments. That's coming next.
Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Me escucho? ¿Sí?
Yes, sí.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias a la doctora Cintia Bejarano, a la doctora Cristina Morales, por toda su paciencia, ¿no? Nunca me acabaré de agradecerles su paciencia. Creo que yo nunca había batallado tanto para escribir de algo como de la maternidad, y algo que han enfatizado las editoras de este libro, pues es pensar en la maternidad como una perspectiva y no solo situarla desde una cuestión biológica, como ya ahorita mencionó ahí en el auditorio una colega, esa intersección entre qué significa el cuidado por los demás, pero también unirlo a un sistema de opresión y cómo reaccionamos desde una parte sensible, desde una parte inteligente, desde una parte también dolorosa. Entonces, pues nada más, muy agradecida. Me siento igual que la doctora Flores Carmona, leyendo y sintiéndome muy cercana a los relatos. Y yo creo que esta es la gran oportunidad de vincular las diferentes formas en que expresamos esa maternidad y mantenemos la esperanza aún en contextos de violencia. Pues le agradezco a toda la audiencia por haber asistido también. Gracias. Gracias al CLACS también. Gracias.
That was Dr. Eugenia Hernandez Sanchez. She's a professor at the Autonomous University of Ciudad Juarez in art, urban studies, music, urban planning. Did I get that right, Marisol? Lots of different things. And also NMSU Aggie, former Aggie. So, so I think we're ready for Q&A. If anyone is interested.
We could also do what we do in class and pick somebody.
What were the main challenges your team faced while writing and creating this book?
Well, I think the main challenge was coordination of all of the contributors. So there was a lot of contributors, a lot of working at different stages of development and working with everybody trying to meet deadlines and things of that sort. Identifying the contributors, I think that came really easy because, and there's just so many great examples of very strong, resilient women along the border. So we did have an idea of who we wanted to be a part of this collection, and we were very grateful and thankful that most of the people that we wanted to contribute did. And so that part was the easy part, right? We knew that there were important stories to be said and important people who needed to say them. So it was bringing it all together. Also the language, right? Working with 2 languages and editing work in multiple languages was also one of the, I guess, yeah, one of the challenges, yes, that we had. Do you want to?
Everything that Cristina said, and thank you for that question. There were just, it was important, I feel, when we discussed this, that it was very border centric, because oftentimes there isn't space for border stories that aren't glorifying violence. Yes, we've talked about border violence, really hard-hitting testimonials and issues, because that's the reality. But I hope that in this collection, we've demonstrated how to counterbalance that violence with resiliency, with the resistance of these incredible women who oftentimes aren't given the space to share their stories. And so I think about, just as a quick example of like a magazine I picked up at the airport once that talked about like 100 famous women. And I picked it up shortly after the book was in print, and Cristina and I received our copy, and I kept thinking, this is why we pulled together this book over the course of these several years, because these incredible women would never be on a Times, New York Times magazine, you know, the most important 100 women in the world, even though they are. And so that's really why I think we were excited about this project, that it's a labor of love, was to elevate their stories, to inspire not just both of us, but everybody here and anyone who's able to pick up the book and read it or borrow the book from somebody. It's about those unsung heroes of the border that we don't hear about unless you're in the thick of it, working with them day in, day out, much like all of you that are here, because pretty much we didn't pay you to be here, but we know pretty much all of you here, and your own unsung story as unsung heroes, I think is really important. We could write volumes and volumes and volumes of Frontera Madrehood and never capture the essence, the importance of the work that people do at the border, their own testimonials, their own advocacy work, not just women, men as well. Folks here that are part of the LGBTQ plus community too, that are not given the adequate space. And so moving down the road, if we still have energy, if people want to collaborate, there's so much more that needs to be shared. Questions of indigeneity at the U.S. Mexico border and women who we never hear about. And those stories are also captured here through the work and the testimony of Marisa Duarte from Arizona State University, Mariela Vasquez from Ciudad Juarez, who is Mixteca, who talks about health disparities in Ciudad Juarez and racialized and colonized violence or colonial violence. So there are numerous stories that we're so grateful that are part of this collection. And it's about sharing their stories. That's what this is about. I think there might be another. Querían, hicieron. Sandra, okay. Sandra asked a question here.
Oh, there.
Okay, so there's an anonymous attendee that is asking if the book is out. So yes, it is out. It was just released September 17th. It's available. It'll be for sale at the reception after this. And there'll be a 30% discount that's applied. And I do thank you for that question, because Cristina and I also wanted to share that the first several years of the sale, the book royalties. Anyone who knows how academic presses work, you're not going to become a millionaire or make hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the royalties that we will get in these first years, there's several nonprofit organizations who are represented in this book, and we'll be working to share the book royalties that come to us to give to the organizations that are represented in the book.
So there's another question by Sandra Gutierrez to the editors, actually. She says, as I was writing, there was an emphasis from the editors to give a face to this story. Can you say more about your thoughts behind this? I have an idea, but would love to hear more about your rationale behind this beautiful approach.
Well, again, thank you, Sandra, Dr. Gutierrez. It was really also wanting to honor the women in our lives that we've worked with for over 2 decades. And identifying locally, you'll see that there's a lot of stories from the Paso del Norte region. The reason why Paula Bonilla Flores is the book cover is no coincidence. Again, it was having the women, for me, the families, the mothers in particular that I've known for 25 years that inspire me every single day. It was the farm workers or former farm workers like Dr. Sandra Gutierrez that inspire me every single day, like so many students that are here. People who have resisted, who have worked as activists on the ground, like Margaret Brown Vega, that inspire me every single day. And so I think that was the approach we wanted to take, was to open space, that there are scholars at the U.S. Mexico border that should be valued. They should be cited. Their work should be explored. But also community activists that don't have that platform oftentimes to share their own stories of resilience, as we said earlier. So it was partially people that we knew, and then also we did some exploration to find others across the whole border.
And I think it was also an opportunity to say the stories from our perspective, right? So much of the border is said from those who do not live here, who don't experience the border, who don't know both the struggles, but also the culture and the joy and the family, the complexities of living on the border. Our stories are told by outsiders who don't understand who we are. And so that was really important for us to provide a space for that.
There's some more questions if you want to answer them.
There's
someone here already.
Okay.
There's 2 people here. Okay, we'll go back to online in a second. We'll take some questions in the room.
How long did it take from conceptualization to fruition to come up to work on this project? When did you start working on it to when you got to this point?
I would say that it was probably about 4 years, right? It's like when we noticed the trends happening in the parade, right? And the indoctrination of our children, right? To buy into this militarization and this normalization of violence and wanted a different future for them, right? And so we started going to the parade, not as observers, but as researchers. We took several pictures of the parade route, and we started documenting the change that was happening. And so I would say that that probably happened in about 2 years. And then, yeah, it was about 4-year process, right, Cynthia? It was about a 4-year process from that. And then conceptualizing the story that we wanted to tell about this and going beyond what we were seeing, and also thinking about, well, what are the experiences of just parenting on the border and how it's different than what it is in other parts of the world, right? The discussions that we have are very different, right? How do we explain the injustices that we're seeing? How do we explain the complexity of the militarization and also being the one of the only livable wage jobs on the border, right? How do we explain all of those things, right, to our own children and, you know, future generations, and wanting to know also and learn from our contributors of how they learned to navigate those complexities.
Thank you. So we have another question here.
I say in Spanish. Se habla mucho sobre la violencia en la frontera, pero creo que cada frontera tiene una violencia muy diferente, porque en Juárez se habla mucho sobre los feminicidios. Y, por ejemplo, en Tijuana se habla mucho sobre el crimen organizado, sobre la violencia hacia los migrantes. Y veo que este libro habla sobre, en general, toda la violencia, que la junta en un solo tema. ¿Cómo hacen eso? Que puedan no encapsularlo en diferentes partes, porque pueden ser solo un libro sobre feminicidio o solo un libro sobre crimen organizado en la frontera. ¿Cómo es esta relación en el libro de este tipo de violencia?
Gracias por la pregunta. Aunque sean formas de violencia que están diferentes en las diferentes fronteras, toda la violencia es violencia estructural, right? Y toda la violencia viene de las injusticias que tienen en común. Salen diferentes en diferentes lados, pero realmente son las injusticias que se ven en la frontera. Y teniendo un concepto de violencia estructural, nos ayuda a traer y ver, ¿verdad?, lo que tenemos en común.
Creo que tenemos otras preguntas y también quería darle espacio a Leticia López, si quiere, es una de las contribuidoras que está en línea. No sé si quiere leer una de sus poemas que forma parte de este libro también.
Buenas tardes a todas. Cintia, Cristina, muchas gracias de veras por haberme dado esta oportunidad, porque para mí más que todo fue una catarsis porque viví durante 22 años la violencia que vivieron los niños, niñas y adolescentes en la cuestión de niños no acompañados de la migración. De verdad fue algo que tenía yo que sacar porque traía mucho dolor de haber vivido todo esto y que mi hija Marisol me acompañara en todo este proyecto. En otra ocasión van a estar ustedes por acá, a lo mejor en UTE me habían comentado en la universidad, pues para poder participar un poquito más, ¿sí? Pero si me permiten leerles el poema, porque a raíz de todo esto nace también, por el dolor vivido, nace toda esta sensación de escribir y de sacar todo esto en uno de mis libros de poemas titulado Asómate a la realidad y transfórmala. Uno de los poemas se titula Aquel migrante, aquel morral. Lleva una lata, un vaso de agua, poco de pan. Lleva una virgen para rezar. Con valentía sigue sus pasos que ni la muerte podrá parar. Él su destino quiere cambiar. Sus ilusiones y su familia quedan atrás. Son presa fácil de todo el mundo. ¿A dónde van? ¿A dónde van? Aquel migrante, aquel morral. Él va buscando con humildad lo que no encuentra en su ciudad. Busca trabajo, se busca el pan y muchos niños a su mamá. Aquel migrante, aquel morral, es confundido por criminal y cuando logra cruzar fronteras, enormes muros y grandes mallas por los vagones, por las garitas o por el río, encuentra el miedo. Es otro idioma, otra cultura y está muy lejos de su mamá. Él es el destino que entró a buscar. Y lo reciben con grandes armas muy poderosas. Es el racismo, humillaciones y falsedad. Aquel migrante, él solo lleva en su morral un vaso de agua, sus ilusiones y poco de pan. Gracias. Gracias a todas.
Thank you. We have a couple of other questions before we have very little time, but these are important questions so we can go through, hopefully, if you all want to stay. An anonymous attendee asks, how did contributors get to know each other through this process? How were contributors transformed or impacted by the experience of working together or getting to know each other's stories? For example, did Señora Paola and Señora Taide know each other?
Bueno, pues yo creo me ayuda porque precisamente que me ayuda, simplemente que la admiro, la señora que habló ahorita, ¿verdad? De su nieto. Primero quiero decirle que no pierda la fe, que yo nunca he perdido la fe de tener la justicia. Si aquí no, la justicia divina yo sí la sigo esperando. Me ayuda para darnos fuerzas para también seguir, para no renunciar a ese reclamo de justicia, y me ayuda para pensar que no somos las únicas, las mamás de las niñas asesinadas, que también están las abuelas, están las mamás de niños asesinados, que tienen el mismo derecho a la vida. Perdón, pero no escuché porque estaba un zumbido muy, muy fuerte, pero bueno, no sé si quedó concluida la pregunta.
So Doña Taide and Doña Paula have not met. And this is the first, I would say, the publication of the book, and then hopes to have continued conversations like this, public events so that they can meet. But speaking of challenges, I will say our communications back and forth in English and Spanish translated. Sometimes not all of our contributors had, as you heard, like Doña Taide had a desktop or other facilities to be able to communicate. So we used WhatsApp a lot to communicate with people. And then the same information was either that was sent via email to activists, scholars, etc. Then we'd cut and copy everything and put it in a WhatsApp, or make phone calls, or drive directly to Nogales to get information to Doña Taide, which of all the contributors was the hardest hit with having access to technology. Paula, thankfully, I see her a lot. I thank my lucky stars for that. So it's a work in progress where I think we hope to have community events where we can bring different contributors together to share their work and then see what the potential is to create other things, to get the word out about their stories and about what they do, the organizations that they represent, the work that they've already done for decades now.
Next question online is from Maro Hernández. ¿Qué es algo en común que encontraron horizontalmente en los diferentes capítulos?
Sí. No, algo en común, las injusticias que sufren en todos lados de la frontera son muy parecidas, pero también la resistencia y la fuerza que tienen para ir adelante y nada más sobrevivir, pero triunfar en sus vidas, como doña Paula, que Es una persona que es muy importante y ha influido mucha gente en el mundo. Así que eso es lo que tienen en común. Tienen el dolor, pero también tienen la fuerza. Y eso es lo que los unen a todos.
And in a response for the previous question, Dr. Sandra Gutierrez says that for her, something that transformed, what is something that transformed you as an author or co-author or contributor to this book, right? She says, I can say that for me, it helped me realize everything I had gone through at a very young age. Most importantly, to realize how strong I had been and continue to be. To know that I have the ability to transform pain into change for me and for others. And one last question. Was there any fear or resistance from the community to answer questions because they were afraid of retaliation?
Not until now. I'm going to give this to.
Yeah, so I think the answer is not until now. I think the interview I did for Felicia was like a year ago, maybe. And during that time, like, I think the situation in Texas wasn't as worse as it is today, and there was not like a persecution, a formal persecution through this NGO. So they were very happy to talk to us. And actually, one of the things that Felicia told me over the phone was, if I knew the situation like a year ago, I will never said the words that I said at that time. Mostly because she now feels persecuted, and she's not afraid of herself. She's afraid of not being able to continue doing the work that herself and her NGO is what they're doing on the border. And I think that's the fear. They are not like afraid of being harmed as individuals, but as not being able to continue to do the work that they are doing on the border. And that is, for me, that was extremely powerful to hear from her. And I was like, don't worry, I'm going to protect you and your NGO. And I'm still going to talk about the work you're doing, but by protecting you and not only this NGO, but all the fantastic NGOs that are working on the Rio Grande Valley region.
It's been it's really intense. The book is incredibly intense, but powerful, inspiring. And we're just thankful for all of you making time to be here. We want to make time for the reception so that you can interact with all of the contributors that are here, talk amongst yourselves, discuss some of the topics that we've discussed that are personified in the book, and then hopefully other things that you all can do in your own lives to create change, to recognize neighbors, those around you, reflect on your own neighborhoods, your own barrios, lovingly as we have. And what a beautiful place the border is too. It's complicated, it's beautifully complicated, but it's worth fighting for. Thank you all for being here very much.
Thank you, everyone.